So good evening, everybody. Welcome to Face Health. It's lovely to see you again today. I am Dr. Zarmi Shanawaz, the Medical Director here at Face Health. And before we dive into our program tonight, which I know you're all waiting for eagerly, I would love to introduce our founder and CEO, Dr. Ami Shah, who will fill us in a little bit about what our vision here at Face really is. Over to you, Ami.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Dr. Ami Shah, and I'm the CEO and founder of Face Health. We're a passionate team of worker bees who are bringing a holistic health platform that allows you to see consults with medical and non-medical providers, educate yourself, have tools and resources and communities in one place. It was actually inspired by my personal journey with my own children when they had some physical delays, and I had a journey and got to speak to almost 2,000 parents and providers, and they had the same pain points of access to care, access to health literate information that we could understand, and that was actually evidence-based and support communities. So thank you for joining us tonight. We hope you learn more. Go to f2fhealth.com and join our journey in optimizing children's health and wellness. Back to you, Zermi.
Thank you, Ami.
Thank you.
Tracey, are you able to hear us or see us?
Yes, I can hear you, but for some reason my video is not working. My son's taken a look at it, but there's no reason we checked it beforehand.
Your tech is not working. I'm going to just make you the host. We had this issue last week as well. I'm going to make you the host, and then if your son can make me the host again, and you should be able to enable your video. So
Okay.
Hopefully that should work. Takes a lot of minds to put this together, everyone. So I'll get started while hopefully you can get your video on. So once again, Ami, welcome everybody. So, you know, sleep and babies, unfortunately, often they don't go hand in hand. Mine certainly did not go hand in hand when I was trying to raise my 3 little ones. So this is a topic that's very close to my heart, certainly. And to help us tonight in discussing these particular issues and hopefully answering your questions, and we certainly got a lot of questions in for this evening's webinar, I'm really pleased to introduce Tracey Brander, who is a licensed occupational therapist. She's also a licensed massage therapist, and if that wasn't enough, she's also a certified sleep therapist. Tracey has extensive experience working with infants and young children with sensory, neural, and developmental problems, such as feeding and sleep difficulties. So really the OT and the sleep therapy go hand in hand, certainly in many conditions. In particular, Tracey has worked for many years in the neonatal intensive care unit, and she brings her thorough experience and knowledge and training in touch and massage therapy to her practice. So Tracey, I was hoping that we could see your lovely face. How are you going there?
Unfortunately, my son has tried all the different things, but it's still not working. I can hear you guys and see you guys, but you still can't see me.
Right. Can you maybe try and, I mean, I'm assuming you've tried switching your video on and off.
Yep. Yes, we've tried that too.
Okay. I'm going to actually get in touch with our CTO who maybe can help us.
Okay.
But we can perhaps start talking about things. Let me just text him right now. No video for Tracey. There we go. Okay. Ami, we don't hear you.
I don't hear her either.
Oh, sorry. I don't think this is a CTO thing. I think this is a Zoom thing. My camera just shut off and I didn't touch anything.
Oh.
So it's weird. It's coming. We had this issue last time. I just think we need to put in an issue with Zoom.
Oh, they said we can hear her. We don't need to see her.
That some of the participants are saying we don't care. We don't mind not seeing you as long as we can hear you. Let's just get started. Yeah.
Okay, so everybody can hear me well then.
We can hear you perfectly.
Okay.
Tracey, I mean, obviously we all know, intuitively and instinctively that sleep is important for children. But can we actually just talk a little bit about from a pathophysiological level, why this is so?
Well, if everybody needs to sleep, and sleep is crucial to everybody, but it is particularly important in the first year of life, mainly because there's so many neural connections being made and being formed, skills are being learned, habits are being created, and these behaviors are being shaped in this very crucial period of time from birth to 1 year of age. So the brain has to have rest and to repair, rejuvenate, as all these changes are taking place. Sleep allows the parts of the brain engaged in waking tasks to relax, but at the same time, other parts of the brain engaged are working hard while we sleep. So they help embed all the memory and all the cognitive functions that we all have.
Right. And so what happens actually with lack of sleep in this age group?
Well, a lack of sleep can have some really negative effects on short and long-term health of our babies and toddlers. For infants in particular, insufficient rest can stunt their brain development and can severely impact their future mental abilities. So having sufficient sleep for infants and young children provides them the ability to process sensory information in their environment. In turn, it helps the infants to become more aware of their surroundings, and then they can begin to learn. This group also needs to sleep more than our older children and adults. Actually, at this age, even after they're first born, infants are creating habit formation from their parents and the others that take care of them during the day. And understanding that habit formation is key to help in implementing nap and bedtime routines. So when you're talking about sleep, something just very brief, you have to have a sufficient REM sleep, which is that really deep sleep that helps with our mental development. And that non-REM, or that more lighter sleep, helps with the physical repair. And that, so infants and children all need a consistent sleep schedule for this to happen.
Right. And I think that actually brings us to the first slide that I want to share for this evening, which is, I think it's really helpful to understand how infants sleep and how much sleep they really do need. And if we can all get a picture in our mind and a framework in our mind, then we can actually set ourselves some goals. So let me just go ahead and share this slide with us.
Okay.
With the team. I'm going to call everyone the team. So again, this is a pretty simple to understand table, but Tracey, if you could take us through the appropriate sleep requirements.
Sure. Of course, our newborns, they need a lot of sleep. They usually tend to sleep 16, 18 hours, but I know when my three children were small and newborns, they slept up to probably about 20 hours a day with multiple naps during the day. When you're thinking about demand feeding, whether they're breastfeeding or bottle feeding, they need to be woken up every 2 to 3 hours to feed. And you got to remember our wake windows, which is the time that the babies are actually have their eyes open and looking around, are only about 45 to 60 minutes until about 3 months of age. So our older babies from about 6 to 18 months average about 14 to 16 hours. And then, if you look at the graph, it could be a little bit tweaked a little bit with 11 to 12 hours during the night. So, so they should start to sleep through the night, but that's not an expectation. It's usually somewhere around 9 months, give or take a month or two, that they should have a fairly good consistent sleep routine with 3 distinct naps, and the wake windows are somewhere around 2 to 3 hours. And then around 10 months, babies should be able to drop to about 2 naps, and their wake windows are about 3 hours, if not just a little bit more. If you look down past the 15 months and between 18 months, they usually sleep around 11 to 14 hours a day. But again, there's many factors that skew those time frames, such as waning, day-night confusion, if they're getting short naps during the day, if they're overly tired, and if they're having sleep regressions or growth spurts. Sleep is a time of repair, but a critical time for nurturing brain development. So when we say poor quality sleep can significantly impact them for the rest of their lives, yes, it really can. So what we want to do is foster positive sleep habits and get them established along with good behaviors and positive habits that's going to last a lifetime of good sleep.
Right, and just bringing you back to that question of, sleeping through the night. I think it's important to understand what that actually means. I think the AAP defines sleeping through the night as anything more than 5 hours. So, when we tell parents that your baby should be sleeping through the night, that doesn't necessarily mean that the parents are getting a good 8 hours of sleep themselves. They're often
Correct.
probably still having to wake up at, that 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning, right?
And it's tough. A lot of people, don't realize they can lose up to 16 weeks of sleep in the first year. That's a lot of sleep deprivation in the household. So,
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that. So, you've had a lot of experience. You've consulted with a lot of clients. What are some of the general patterns that you see that most of us kind of, those common traps that we fall into? I don't want to use the word wrong, but what could we be doing? What could we be doing better, in your opinion?
um, basically, the general patterns I see, I'm doing full-time early intervention now. So what I'm seeing in about 80 to 90% of my children with sleep patterns is that they don't have consistent daily routines. That means and encompasses those evening and bedtime routine. So if parents aren't using those wake windows for the babies and their small children to plan their nap times appropriately, the babies are going to be overtired. And then parents think, well, hey, let's keep up a little bit longer and let's try and wear them out, physically wear them out. But it actually has the opposite effect. When you do that, it's kind of like us as an adult doing Zumba an hour before we go to bed. So the baby has a harder time calming themselves down and letting that brain get the sleep and get into a deep rest. Um, there's also some things, that people don't think about if there's issues with co-sleeping, co-bedding, that creates some issues with sleep. Um, and a lot of people don't realize that parents and caregivers are used as procs or sleep associations, like you're rocking them to sleep. You're not putting them down like semi-alert in their cribs or their bassinets, taking them in the car to get them to sleep. And things like that have a really negative impact on our kids. And there's other factors too involved with sleep. Anything from how the room is arranged. What's the noise going on in the household? Is it overstimulating there? Um, More specifically, I worked in the NICU for 19 years, and when I look at the preemies, so if there's any parents out there or preemies tonight, you need to look at that they have immature sensory systems and they're usually very overstimulated. And Preemies have a hard time with things. So you might see them change some colors, or their breathing may not be as good, or you might be looking at their stress signals on their monitors and things when you bring them home. They have a hard time getting to sleep. So they have to be swaddled a certain way, use a pacifier, and be placed in certain positions to get them to help them calm. I think one of the most underutilized things that we can do as parents of small babies and little kiddos is using kangaroo care or that skin to skin care. I just saw it firsthand in the NICU of how well these babies go into such a deep sleep, and it really helps them put on the weight, helps them to get the sleep. But even at home, when you bring the babies home and stuff, that's a great way to do some calming with them and let them hear your heartbeat and let them smell your scent. That's very calming to our babies. And babies that are term, and premature, parents tend not to make that consistency and bringing other people that care for the baby in on what's going on with their nap times or sleep times. and they're not looking for their sleep cues. So there's a whole bunch of things going on at the time that, you keep saying that they're doing things wrong. It may be that they're just missing some pieces to making their child sleep better, more efficient.
Right. Something interesting that you mentioned was the use of pacifiers. I know there's a bit of controversy around pacifiers. Is that something actually that you do recommend in sleep training or in?
Sometimes we do. It's because that's sometimes a sleep association is the pacifier, and then you can use a fading method where they can use it for a little bit of time and then start dropping down the amount of time that they use it. Our premature babies, when they're in the NICU, we use pacifiers a great deal because that's one of the very few things that they have for self-calming. Because usually they're too small and like they can't get to midline, bringing their hands and their bodies towards the middle of their bodies, so they don't have a lot to go with unless they're swaddled very tightly, and they're so tiny that gravity kind of melts them into their mattress. So bringing them to midline and giving them the pacifier, that non-nutritive suck, actually is very beneficial for them. But I'm not saying that our full-term babies can't have it too. We just, as I said, we don't always want it as a sleep association, like a crutch or a prop, as they're getting older.
Got it. Okay, so just to everyone out there, I'm just going to keep the slides on. Normally, we do like to have the experts who are speaking kind of on full screen, so we can kind of feel like it's a little bit more of a personal experience. But
Sure.
given Tracey's video situation, we'll just keep the slides up. Again, I should have mentioned, if any of you have any questions that you would like Tracey to answer during the webinar, please feel free to pop them in the chat. So Tracey, this kind of brings us really to my favorite section of these webinars, which is really to kind of put some of these misconceptions to bed, pardon the pun. And the first one, which I think we've all heard, and probably a lot of us have practiced, is babies will sleep later if put to bed later. Can you share your thoughts on that one, please?
Sure. Unfortunately, that is a myth. Babies sleep better longer and actually cry less if they're put to bed early in the evening. I think I touched on this briefly earlier. The reason being that if babies go to bed late, they're actually overtired and they can't get them to calm down so they can, get to sleep and let their brains kind of relax. So unfortunately, that is not a true statement.
Okay, I'm not terribly surprised, I think, for that one. Let's move along to the next one. Sleep training your baby can cause brain injury or damage.
That was an interesting one when I was reading through that one, but that isn't true. I guess people do go, like if they're looking for a sleep training method, and I'll just pick out the one that seems to be the most controversial, is the cry it out loud. You're letting them cry out until they fall asleep. I guess they've read, either some research articles saying that the crying causes increased cortisol levels, which may rewire the child's brain, and cause some type of brain damage. But actually, that's not true. Letting your baby cry for periods of time is actually characterized as positive stress, meaning you're afraid to do it, but it will benefit you in the end. And, so the benefit is if you can tolerate some of their crying for a few days, then it eventually does get better. But the baby's learning to sleep. So again, it's a skill. So the stress your baby's feeling is fairly mild and will eventually go away.
Right. And just for those of you who aren't aware, cortisol is what is commonly known as, the stress hormone. And so I guess the idea there is that sort of, enhancing your baby's stress levels to what is deemed to be, unhealthy could cause damage. But thanks for correcting us on that one, Tracey. Let's go along to the next one. Never wake a sleeping baby. I wish I had that problem, but never wake a sleeping baby.
Well, my mother used to tell that to me all the time when I had my kids. They're like, she's like, don't do anything. But basically, it's true that it gives us parents a break, and sleep is good for our babies. So here's some good examples when parents need to wake up their baby. One, if the baby needs to eat. We had just talked about that before. Usually they're on demand and they should be waking up 3.5 hours to eat. They should be waking up for that. So you certainly can jostle them very gently if they're really past their feeding time. And again, for our premature babies, and some of our full-term kids are, you want to make sure that they're getting their nutrition. So that's very important. You want to get your baby in a good day and nighttime routine. So you have to keep it fairly bright during the day, and dark in the evening. But even as a sleep consultant, that's a little controversial as well about, I do tell them to close up the shades or the curtains to make it a little bit darker so then they can relax a little bit quicker. So you can kind of play with that a little bit. When you're keeping them in a consistent routine, you want to keep their nap times in the afternoon from 1 to 2 hours, so they're not sleeping too late, or you're going to have to tweak their schedule. So it goes into the last one here. If they're napping all day long, then they won't sleep well at night. So you might want to keep something like a very general sleep log to track how long your baby's napping for and when. So then you can kind of start to see a pattern start to develop. And if it's not working, then it needs to be tweaked or changed to make it more efficient, so the baby is getting their sleep that they need.
So what you're saying is that there is an optimum, I guess, duration for which a baby should be napping during the day. And so there, if they're kind of going over that, that is a good enough reason to wake a sleeping baby.
Yes. Yes, because as I said, you want them to eat, but you also don't want them sleeping till 4 and 5 o'clock, because you're usually putting a baby down somewhere between 6:30 and 7 o'clock. So if you're letting them sleep too late, then the whole pattern will start going off. So that's why a sleep log is kind of a nice thing to do.
And is there a preferable way of waking a sleeping baby?
You just want to gently jostle them, like you can even go into the room and say, "Hi," and give them their name, but very gently. You don't want to turn off, on the bright lights and do, things that are like gonna like startle them and frighten them. But you would just go into their room and, say their name calmly. And then I would just, if you do have anything like the curtains open, you start to slowly, gently open them open to see if they can start getting themselves out of their sleep.
Got it. Okay. If your baby wakes up at night, it means he or she is hungry.
Okay. Well, that's a good one, but I'm like, that may not be the only reason why they're waking up. And you got to remember, you got to see what's their age, how old are they and they're waking up. It could mean different things. Yes, it could be that they are hungry and they do need to have that nighttime feeding. And there's nothing wrong with that. As I said, up till, 4, 5, 6 months, they still might need a night feeding. The other reasons that they could be waking up is that they've had too much sleep during the day, or they've had too little day sleep, and now they're overly tired and they can't get into that deep sleep. And that's really important to that's where that log would really be a good thing, so they can actually see a pattern, or they're like, oh, you know what, I did put them down late today and they slept to this time. Maybe I should have waited 15 minutes to a half an hour later to put them down for them to try and get to sleep. Sometimes they're too hot or too cold. I have, some kids are very hot-blooded. So you need to look at, the temperature of the house, or particularly their room, and make sure that they're being dressed appropriately for their comfort. Sometimes they're sick. I mean, we can tell that right away, usually when they're sick. And teething's a really tough one. I get, in early intervention, a lot of our sleep issues are coming about with teething. I get a lot of problems when the teething starts to happen. Until that teeth breaks through, they're going to be very cranky and waking up during the night with pain.
Yeah. Okay, and this brings me to myth number 5. Put rice cereal in your baby's night bottle to help him or her sleep.
Okay, well, I actually did that for my daughter who had severe reflux. So I used to take some of these myths and use them. So we keep her from vomiting and having the reflux during the nighttime. But actually, the AAP discourages feeding anything solid, rice or oatmeal. cereal before the age of 4 months. And they just say that the baby's digestive tract is just too immature for that at that point. Um, but it is still normal for babies to wake up that are more than like 4 months of age in the middle of the night to eat. As I said, my oldest, who will be 24 in a few weeks, he was hungry all the time, and I started feeding him rice cereal and stuff at a very young age through my mother. So it was a myth that I picked up on. And now seeing everything in retrospect, things that I didn't do very well, but I thought at the time that I was doing my baby some real good, so yeah, I wouldn't try and put the rice in, even, as I said, I know that we were doing it in the NICU, and that's, a different environment altogether about thickening feeds and things like that. But for a regular newborn, and, as they're growing and stuff, if you can hold off doing some actual solid foods up until somewhere around 4 months when their stomachs are a little more mature.
Yeah. So now that we've busted a few myths, Tracey, the golden ticket here, how do we get our kids to sleep? Can you share some general tools and tips of the trade that we can take away with us?
Sure. There's a lot of things that we can, just simple things that, we don't really think about. But the bottom line is, getting our children to sleep takes time. It takes commitment, and it takes consistency to get babies in a positive sleep routine. And again, I can't emphasize how important it is that all the people who have contact with the baby during the day to be on board with the daily routine, along with the consistent mat schedule. Additionally, an evening routine that everybody follows is crucial to getting them to sleep. You can use things like sound machines, the white noise machines, aromatherapy, which is relatively new after the age of 3 months, may be beneficial. And when it comes to essential oils, the more research I did on it, basically the only ones that they're really looking at right now is the essential oils of lavender and chamomile as being the safest. And again, that's still very controversial depending on what you read. And then if things get really bad, they can certainly consult with a certified sleep consultant. If they've tried some sleeping methods and nothing seems to be working, then they may want to talk to them, so that's one thing. I did put in a little section here about preemies in the NICU because the overstimulation. All babies should be swaddled. So the swaddler is a very important thing for our babies. It does help calm our nervous systems. But when you're bringing a baby home from the NICU, I just tell folks to make sure that they understand that these babies don't really understand what it is to have quiet and darkness. So I let the parents know, I'm like, it's going to be really hard for them to adjust. So you might need to use some noise in the house because it's not real noise, but it can be very noisy in the NICU at times. And there's always light for the most part, unless they're really using a cyclical lighting. So I say, make sure you use some soft lighting or some white noise machines so they can get some noise, so that will help them transition at home. And being that I am a licensed massage therapist, I always add infant massage in as a great way to help all of our babies and children before settling down for the night. I don't know if that's something you use, Army, on any of your children. I really enjoy doing mine with my 3 kids. And it only takes a few minutes of massage and put it into your nighttime routine. And some of the parents that I've worked with in EI had started doing some massage, and they were fascinated by how positive and how calm the babies got and made them very sleepy. So it can be done after bath time. It can, you get the pajamas on, you can do a little bit there. And I certainly feel that, starting them with the reading with them at nighttime before they go to bed is very important in their routine.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah, then
yeah.
the sleeping cues, the reading. Certainly, I also used to do the nighttime massage, after bath with a bit of lavender oil. Um,
Hmm.
and used to feel very jealous because I wish someone would massage me with lavender oil before
Yes.
I went to bed every night. Yeah, and perhaps if anyone's interested, when we do send out the resources to all of you listening tonight, we could include some how-tos for baby massage, Tracey, if you'd be kind enough to supply us with something like that later on.
Sure.
Um, so you had been talking about sort of creating an environment, and can we go into a little bit more detail about that? Because I think some of the things that you mentioned to me are just kind of seem common sense, but things that we don't really necessarily think about, such as like overstimulating pictures, for example, on the wall.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, as I was getting certified this past year as a sleep consultant, I didn't think about these things in the past, but thankfully I must have given it some thought when I'm thinking back at my own nurseries with my own kids. But you want to look at the space at home, or the co-sleeping space or the nursery where the baby's going to be. You certainly want to do their nap times in their cribs or their bassinets, and if they're being watched by the grandmothers, if they go back and forth between households, those are types of things that you need to look at the space where they're sleeping, because it's pretty crucial in how they can get to sleep or not. So not optimizing the space, but you want to look at you just said, the overstimulating pictures that are hung near the crib, because they're getting more aware of their environment and something may be catching their eye that's on the wall, that it's keeping them from calming down. So you want to look at you want to look at where the furniture is placed. Is there natural or artificial light? Like how bright is it? We talk about night lights. Usually babies up until 2 really don't need night lights. I never knew that. My kids all had a night light in their nursery. But they really don't need that type of thing at night. They don't get really scared of the dark until around 2. So I'm learning things as I go here too. So you want to look and see, do you have a hardwood floor? Does it creak a lot? Some of our babies are very light sleepers. So, is there a carpet or like an area rug in front of the crib? So if you want to go in and check on them, if you don't have a monitor, those things are very important. But as I said, getting them into a good, consistent routine, and going around their wake times and their wake windows instead of when we want to put them down because we have to do some running. We have to do this. We have an appointment. We have this and that. But we have to make our children's sleep a priority.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, we've incorporated all of your tips, Tracey, and we're patting our backs because we've done a great job at getting our kids to sleep through the night. And then all of a sudden, they undergo sleep regression. And as babies do regress around, what is it, 4, 6, 8 to 10 months when they're going through separation
Correct.
anxiety, again around 18 months and around 2 years. So acknowledging that sleep regression is normal. um,
Yes.
what are some specific things that are actually causing the sleep regression? And then if you could briefly just, again, go through some tips in terms of how to suddenly deal with this regression, apart from
Sure.
pulling out
Okay.
our hair and
Yep, sleep regressions, like you said, they do come in those increments, especially during, the first year of life and then afterwards at 18 and usually like 2 years. They seem to come along as they're passing through developmental milestones or a stage. Say, for example, you're starting to crawl, they're starting to roll over, sit up. So they're doing some developmental things, and that usually coincides that they're becoming more active. So it corresponds with the brain in trying to slow that down. They're thinking about what they've done today. They're processing that information, and they're becoming more aware of their environment. So they're kind of like looking around, and what happens is that um, these will happen usually somewhere between 10 and 21 days, that sounds like an eternity to a parent that is sleep deprived. But there are things that you can do. Again, staying consistent with the baby's bedtime, even though they've been up multiple times during the night, you want to try and keep with their, see what time they wake up, look at their wake windows. You start looking for their cues. They're rubbing their eyes, they're maybe yawning, they're kind of zoning, so you really want to, and then act very quickly. You see those, and then you want to act on it. That's when you'll put them down very quickly. It's time for nap. You don't have to say anything, just get them prepared and put them down in their crib. So there's also avoiding forming bad habits. So if they're waking up multiple times during the night, you don't want to start rocking them back to sleep. If you weren't doing that before and then suddenly you're doing it during these sleep regressions, children are very quick to pick up negative habits in their sleep. So I wouldn't give them the opportunity to do that. Or if they, if you feel like they need every 2 hours that you're going and feeding them, they're going to start waking up looking for food every 2 hours.
Mm.
So you don't want to do that. Try and avoid that, and try and stick with the schedule because it isn't forever. As I said, there is a time frame, usually 10 to 21 days, usually 10 to 14, because I get it even, in EI, people ask me about it. And I'm like, it should start to calm down once they've gotten through that phase. And then they're on another path of learning something new in their development, and that'll calm back down. So, try and think about, what's my baby doing right now developmentally? Is he crawling? Is he starting to pull the stand? Like, what is he doing right now? Is he babbling more? Do you see his speech coming? That's when you might see a sleep regression.
Right. And I would just add to that, I think the other thing to take note of is any change in routine. So, maybe starting daycare or having a new nanny around, or,
Yes,
and then
correct.
travel, which, affects as adults just as much as it affects little ones. And then the other thing, of course, is illness, right? Which kind of brings me to my next question, which is, when should we start to worry about a child in terms of their sort of a physical ailment, perhaps that's causing either sleep regression or sleeplessness, and what are the more common
Well,
situations?
yes.
Mm,
One of our most common ones is colic, where they
yeah,
just cry and cry and cry. So you can try all the calming and soothing things, but there are just some babies that will just continue to cry. And we just really don't have a reason to. And, all of a sudden they go through this developmental phase or growth spurt, and it just disappears. My kids never had colic, but I know friends that have had colicky babies, and it's usually like the first 3 to 4 months is just, these babies just, we don't know if it's because they're having gas, they're having a lot of pain. So that's why I say, try the massage, try the soothing methods and different things. Um, the essential oils and different types of things, because, with a colicky baby, sometimes there is nothing, and you get in that bewitching hour from like the, late afternoon into the evening to 11 o'clock at night. And that's when you will see some of these babies really roar. And, what we can do is, you swaddle them, you talk to them, you do the best you can, but, we don't have an actual cure-all for a baby with colic. Now, a baby with reflux, my daughter was a very happy baby with reflux. She puked with a smile, but that's not always the case with some of our babies. It's very painful for them, so you want to keep them upright after you feed them for about 20 to 30 minutes. That allows the stomach to empty out and go into the small intestine before you would lay them down. We don't want to put our babies in our car seats, or we certainly don't want to put them in anything that would put them at risk for SIDS. So we don't want to put them in sleep positioners, nests, swings, the reclined bouncy seats. There's so many new products out there today that may not have safety standards mandated on them. So we don't know if they're safe. So we still want to keep them on their backs to sleep. But you can certainly, hold them and cuddle them. But, as I said, colic is a really tough thing. Reflux is a really tough thing. And you always want to check with your pediatrician for the reflux, because it could be that they've grown and that, if they're on medication for their reflux, it may not be an effective dose at that point, so you want to take a look at that as well.
Correct. Yeah. And I think from a physician's perspective, I would just put in there that if, this kind of unsettledness, persists for more than a week to 10 days, it's a good idea to, it's never harmful to take them in for a medical review.
Right.
Great. So that's been really helpful. Let's skip along. We've got a ton of questions, so I kind of want to make sure that we are able to answer these questions. So Tracey, let's just kind of, I guess, if there was 5 things that you wanted people to take away from the talk today, what would they be?
Well, number one is that babies need sleep not just for their rest, but for all the neural development. I didn't go really into all that sensory neural development, but it's crucial when our babies are learning new activities, and they're growing and learning so much in the first year. That's a big takeaway. Also, familiarizing yourself with how much sleep your baby needs. And there are thousands of charts. I can Google them. I got them from, some of them from my sleep consulting work as well. But just familiarize as the baby's going through, like, oh, you know what? I think they're not getting enough rest. So looking at your own child and their sleeping patterns, and being very, your baby better than anybody, so you can take a look and see and adjust the baby's sleep needs as appropriate. Number 3, yes, plan nap times around the baby's wake windows, not around that's convenient for you, the parent. I know that's really hard to do when we have such busy lives anymore. But you know what? Even when my kids are small and my youngest one is 10, our lives like evolved around their sleep time, because it's that important. They just need that downtime and they need that sleep. And going along with this is that consistent sleep routine used by all the caregivers in this child's life. It's very important. And if they're in different households, that's when you really need to sit down and discuss that as a team. When it says it takes a village to raise a baby, for the baby's effective sleep, you better believe if there's more people involved, they all need to be on the same page and in agreement with what they're doing, so then it can be carried over to the baby, real important. And the last one is supplemental and environmental modalities can help, infant massage, aromatherapy, white noise, blackout shades, look at the sleep space, look at what they're eating to make sure that, they're not getting gassy and things like that. All those things that, sometimes we just kind of overlook are very important. And if there's been any change in the family dynamics, it can have a huge impact on babies and small children's sleep.
Yeah, and I will actually just point out this aromatherapy, if any of you are interested. As Tracey mentioned, researchers, there's a lot of research that shows that there are certain oils that are safe in our young infants, particularly lavender and chamomile. We actually did we had a great webinar some weeks ago with a very experienced aromatherapist, and she actually did cover a lot of child aromatherapy. And so that is actually on our website if you're interested in going back on that. And we actually also have an incredible sleep module on our website as well under our educational module. So that would certainly be something to take away. So Tracey, before we actually move on to the resources, there were a ton of questions that came in.
Okay.
Even before the webinar started. So I'd love to be able to answer some of those.
Okay.
I'm actually just going to stop this for a little bit and let's go to a live Q&A. So Dali asks, what to do for a child who's 2 years old, waking up in the middle of the night, screaming, possibly having nightmares.
Yeah, it sounds like night terrors. And usually, like I said, that's usually when children start to have actual dreams, and they can turn into nightmares and night terrors. So you definitely want to have something of comfort for them. But you got to remember that when they have these night terrors and nightmares, they're not necessarily awake. They might be screaming, but they may actually still be asleep. So you don't want to like startle them with a loud noise, like your voice going, oh my God, what am I supposed to do? Kind of thing. You just quietly go in there, you can shush them, like they are truly still asleep and you don't want to wake them up, but you can do things like putting hands on, calm, but not a lot of talking, but just, giving them something of comfort, it doesn't have to be anything. And sometimes their pacifier falls out. I have a couple kids on my caseload that pacifier falls out of their mouth throughout the night. You'll see them scream. But with the night terrors, you just want to be as calm as you can when you go in. Make sure they have a night light, not like directly in their face, but definitely you want to have some type of small lighting in there at that point. That is an appropriate time to do that at 2.
Got it. I hope that answers your question, Dali. I had a question from Layla, who is a parent of a 3-month-old who only wakes up once at night around 3 a.m. Should we try to eliminate this wake feed, and if so, when? And do you recommend any particular methods or books?
You said 3 months of age?
3 months.
Yeah, they're still on demand feedings. And sleep training, I really wouldn't start until after 4 months if they were a full-term baby. If they were born a little bit earlier, then you have to adjust their age a little bit. But I think a nighttime feeding is still fine at this point. I probably wouldn't start doing that more after they are 6 months of age and you're starting to actually add in some of the cereals and, filling their bellies up a little bit more. So we can't expect a 3-month-old to sleep through the night. Um, you know, that's highly unusual, but as I said, my kids did sleep through the night at 8 weeks. My one son, 2 weeks. And, and that was a red flag for me. I'm like, no baby sleeps through the night at 2 weeks. So for me, that was a red flag. But for a 3-month-old, that's very normal, so we don't want to force stopping their feedings too soon. So as long as the parents are okay with doing just that one feeding, that's actually that's awesome. They're really on a good path. So and as I said, now they know that these these regressions are coming and they have these growth spurts, so they may you might see some changes in that as well coming up very soon. So if she looks out for it, she'll know what to do, but I would not take away that feed. It's just too young.
Yeah. And as we alluded to earlier as well, I mean, depending upon what time this baby goes to sleep, if it's around, 9 p.m. or 10 p.m., then from 10 to 3 is technically kind of sleeping through the night as well, isn't it?
Correct. That is correct.
Yeah. So my 6-year-old child woke up sleepwalking twice this week. And during the last occasion, he screamed, "You sting." I think it's sting. What might have caused this to happen?
Well, I'm not an expert on 6-year-olds, even though I've had 3 of them. But I mean, it sounds like the sleepwalking is usually stress related. We were giving a little types of things, like he certainly is dreaming, but usually sleepwalking is a result of some type of stressor going on, whether it's just with him or something going on in the family. And him saying "you stink," he may have still been asleep when he was sleepwalking, so he may not have particularly said that to mom, dad, or somebody else in the household. um, but we just make sure that they get back into their beds very gently. We don't want to wake them and startle them, and so just gently trying to get them back towards their door and into their room and back into their beds very gently without doing hardly any talking, because they really are truly still sleeping and we don't want to awaken them, and then they get really scared and they startle and they start to cry, and then we can't calm them down.
Yeah, and again, these kids generally don't have any recollection of these episodes the night before as well. So in terms of concerns about stress, acute stress at that point, it's probably not so much of a concern. Thank you, Tracey. We'll get to the next question from Rebecca. Should a 2.5-year-old have to take a nap, or is that too young to give up on naps?
Quite honestly, I mean, as I said, my kids, as I said, I have no complaints. My kids slept until they had an afternoon nap until they went to kindergarten full day. Um, but at 2.5, they are still growing. And they use a lot of energy. You know, we have our toddlers that are non-stop. I would still suggest doing anywhere from 1 to 2, 2.5 hour nap. You know, some of our kids do outgrow it, but I still think 2.5 is a little young to be doing that because, as I said, they're moving, they're shaking, they're learning a lot, they're talking, they're learning some self-help skills like learning to feed, and they're just doing so much that I think they still need that afternoon nap. And you know, depending on what time you put them down at nighttime, you know. And if it's late, just taking a look at the clock, you're like, oh, and you're looking for those if they're having those sleepiness cues, pick up on them. You know, you might see that your child does this particular behavior and you know that they're tired. Go ahead and put them down for their nap. You know, so it's going to be some observation skills and some quick thinking by our parents here to know, hey, you know, they're starting to get overly tired. I need to get them down, even if it's for an hour. You know, then they have, you know, and in a 2.5-year-old, you still have like a 3 hour wake window. So take a look at that to the time that you're, you know, going to have dinner and that 60 to 90 minute evening bedtime routine. Just take a look at that. You know, even if they're laying down, if they're sleeping for an hour, at least it's an hour of downtime for that brain to process information.
Yeah, and I think even just according to the chart that we shared earlier, up to the age of 5, even
Hmm.
a daytime nap is still kind of okay.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah. And Tracy, the next question actually relates a little bit to what you were mentioning earlier about a baby sleeping through the night at 2 weeks, you know, certain red flags. So the next question is from Omar. My baby is 5 years old and diagnosed with ADHD. Approximately 5 to 7 nights in a month, he has disturbed sleep, waking up in the middle of the night, and it takes 2 to 3 hours to put him back to sleep. But during the day, he sleeps 10 to 12 hours without a nap. Um, is it time to consider a sleep disorder?
That one's a tough one. Because
Yeah.
he's, you know, because he is actually getting enough sleep as far as when he said 10 to 12 hours. That's pretty
I'm
good.
not sure if that means he slept
Total?
hours overnight total. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm sure, but yeah.
Right. So that's definitely needs to be specified. But if it's 10 to 12 hours during the nighttime, that's actually pretty good. My two sons are ADHD. Um, and I knew very early on that they were going to need extra help. So there were some times when they just got so overly tired, and that's what happens to our ADHD kids, is that their mind cannot shut down. You know, my kids did go on medicine, and that is a totally personal choice. Um, but they were older, you know, they were like 6 and 11. You know, but my youngest, who's 10 now, was severely ADHD and couldn't focus and he couldn't learn. So that's what I would be asking the parents is it affecting his learning ability? Is it, you know, then you might want to go see somebody about, you know, a quote unquote sleep disorder. You know, I would see how he's functioning during the day and how he's, you know, managing and processing the stuff, because that's the key, you know, like how functional is he? Is, you know, is he showing any kind of negative behaviors or, you know, is he just not learning as well as he should be in, you know, self-help, you know, his fine motor, his speaking, you know, all these things that are coming into play at that time, imaginary play, you know, so all, you know, like there's a lot of factors in that. So I don't want to give him a definitive answer because it could go a couple different ways depending on the questions that I just asked about development, like how is he doing development wise? You
Yeah.
know, because you never want to medicate if you don't have to. Um, and, you know, as I said, there are different things that you can do. I know some of my kiddos do take melatonin in small doses to try and help produce. You can actually give them some foods that will actually produce natural melatonin in the brain, like this, such as dairy and, you know, some hot cereal, oatmeal. So, like, there's different foods that will actually help with that as well. You know, so you know, I don't want to be too quick to say, hey, you need to get them there right away. because I could be wrong, and you'd hate to put a child through any of that type of stuff. But, I would just tell the dad to keep an eye on those things, and mom as well, and see how well he is functioning. And if he's not really progressing with his development and things, then they might want to get some intervention in that way.
Right. Just a couple more really quick questions. There are a lot of aids out there. As time goes, there are more and more sleeping aids that are coming out for children. I think the latest one is the snoo. The day there used to be the Mamaroo. Thoughts on using sleeping aids?
Well, I did take a look at the snoo. That's pretty fascinating. Expensive, but it has a lot of nice things to it as far as the gentle rocking. It has songs on it. It has white noise. It actually has a built-in swaddler on there for safe sleep. I'm like, wow. And it's developed by Dr. Harvey Karp, who, did the 5 S's, which I used a lot in the NICU with some of my babies that had a hard time calming. I said all the reviews I'm looking at look pretty positive. I'm like, I mean, $1,600 is a lot of money for one of these smart bassinets. I think you had told me you can rent them too for like $118 a month.
Yeah,
You know, I don't see, a negative on that. I know Mamaroo, I looked that one up with the bassinet, which is somewhere between $350 and $400.
yeah.
It looked like it had 5 motions. It has the white noise. It doesn't have the swaddler. And I was looking for a demonstration. I didn't see it, but we used the Mamaroos as far as in the NICU to, get the babies out of their cribs, bassinets, just to get them out. And they worked very well for calming. But as I said, we don't want to use aids such as the snoo, Mamaroo as their sleeping place. For a short amount of time, they're good. And these may work very well, these actual bassinets. I'd love to find out more about them. But I wouldn't use the other types of things, like I said, the vibrating seats and the swings. And, now they have like sleep positioners and wedges. They have all these different types of things, which may be good when they're awake, but you do not want to use those for sleep. According to AAP, which is our academy for pediatrics, safe sleep, has really gone into play to keep the amount of SIDS down. So basically, back on their backs in a crib, in a swaddler, no toys, no baby, no bumper pads, no big blankets, nothing that could cause them to suffocate and die of SIDS. So as far as the bassinets, they're very kind of cool contraptions. I wish I had them when my kids are smaller. But with the other types of things that you're talking about, the other quote unquote aids, I would not use them because I do practice safe sleep.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So I think that kind of brings us to the end of all the questions. If any of you do have more questions, as you know, Tracey is one of our face-to-face health providers, and you can find her at f2fhealth.com. You can find Tracey as well as a whole host of other different types of providers who can help you with your children's healthcare. Tracey has kindly provided us with a couple of resources here that you can go to find out a little bit more information about healthy sleep in your infants. Of course, the other resource that I would like to point out is our educational modules on sleep at Face-to-Face Health. And of course, we do have some other relevant webinars as well. Tracey, there was one other question that had come in before the webinar, which I just want to mention,
Yes.
which was, can you discuss the research on all the different types of sleep training approaches? And I don't want to go into that, but I do want to acknowledge that we received that question. It is such a huge topic, and I'm going to thank whoever sent that question because it gives me an idea for another webinar. So stay tuned. I think it's a great question. And Tracey, if you're up for it, we could have a conversation around that in the future.
It is a big can of worms. It is a very huge, hot topic in sleep consulting right now. So yes, I would be more than happy to do that in the future here.
Excellent. And again, I think we covered this already, but sleeping positions and what they may indicate. We covered that with reflux and colic, but is there anything about sleeping positions that you really quickly want to cover?
No, when I was doing a little more research on that, it did talk about, them sleeping with their arms out or their hands underneath them and things like that. Until they can safely be, like they roll themselves over during the nighttime, just inadvertently, they've rolled over and you're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
We do want to try and flip them back on their backs to sleep. But the positions, as I said, they may have different connotations of what they mean. Like if they're a cheerful person, if they sleep with their hands underneath them, it means this. But we want to keep our babies on their backs until they can literally push up and roll themselves over. Their heads can literally turn and like their necks are, so they're strong enough that they can lift their head against gravity and keep it there. But we want to keep them on their backs for sleep, nap time, and bedtime.
Got it. Okay. So before we sign off for the night, I do just want to just mention our upcoming webinar next week. And I think this is a wonderful topic because it really, really highlights what we're trying to do here at Face to Face Health, which is really trying to look after your family's health holistically. So we often talk about traditional medicine and looking after our bodies, and some of the things that we kind of ignore are kind of what is going on around us. And so this month is also Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month. So we are going to be talking about the basics of special needs planning. So once again, with children with autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, developmental disabilities, again, we often get caught up in kind of the medical know-how, and we often ignore sort of their financial and legal considerations of having a special needs child. So looking forward to hopefully having you all join for that, which is next week on Thursday, same time, same place, and hopefully our video will be working. Tracey, I'm so sorry. We would have loved to see your face tonight.
I know. That's okay.
Unfortunate, but thank you again for sharing your expertise and your time with us tonight. I hope that everybody was helped in some way. And once again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact us at connect@facetofacehealth.com, or go to our website to find out more about Face to Face Health.
Thanks, Army.
Thank you so much, Tracey.
Oh, you're welcome.
And good night to everybody. Have a great evening.
All right. Bye.